Well, another day in Canberra, another round of the major parties trading abuse over asylum seeker policy. The government says Tony Abbott's acting out of self-interest in not supporting its push to rekindle the so-called Malaysia solution. But there's unrest within Labor's own ranks, with one party elder telling caucus today that the party should never violate United Nations conventions. Here's political editor Chris Ullman.
2.6 billion people don't have access to a toilet.
Second MPs and senators motorcycle ride.
Mr Catter, on behalf of firefighters around Australia, congratulations.
Hearing loss and hearing impairment of Aboriginal children.
Someone's going to walk in my shoes and replace me.
Each day, a myriad of interests intersect at federal parliament. Here, the large and small concerns of Australians are aired.
We are going to see an important bill before the parliament today. That is the bill on plain packaging.
Today in this parliament, war crimes committed in Sri Lanka will be addressed.
And so, look, why don't we work with these countries?
But a casual observer could be forgiven for thinking that the nation's obsessed with only one thing.
If the legislation does fail, then that would mean that any offshore processing would, in our view, not be legally sound, and we would not be able to proceed with it.
Offshore processing is at risk.
The amendment that we've put to the government would actually enable the government to go ahead with offshore processing.
Because he knows.
And apparently the national interest rests in the hands of only one man.
Tony Abbott.
Tony Abbott.
Tony Abbott. Mr Abbott.
But behind closed doors, Labor battled over how its own leaders were interpreting the national interest. Its left pushed in caucus for an end to offshore processing, with party elder John Faulkner arguing the party should never undermine United Nations conventions. And Tony Abbott began his day in Melbourne. The night before in Canberra, he shattered the government's hopes that he would reboot the plan to send asylum seekers to Malaysia.
The Prime Minister can't turn around and say to the opposition leader, "Oh, look, it's your responsibility to get my policy through the Parliament."
Never thought about it once.
In Parliament, the faux politeness of yesterday evaporated.
He is terrified that the Malaysia arrangement will work. He is terrified it will work. And what he wants to see for this country is more votes, because he believes that will serve his political interest.
Mr Speaker, we all know the Leader of the Opposition is a weather vane, Mr Speaker, but the weather vane always points to his own political interest and not the national interest.
In government, their actions were not associated with refugee convention countries. Now, there's a word for that, and it's called hypocrisy.
For 40 minutes in question time, the government and opposition thrashed each other over offshore processing.
How many asylum seekers have been processed outside Australia by this government since the government closed the Howard government's Nauru processing centre and abolished the Pacific solution?
Thank you very much. And the Deputy Leader of the Opposition knows the answer to that question. Perhaps she might want us to supply the answer to the question: how many asylum seekers won't be processed offshore because of the reckless negativity of this opposition? You're right. You're right. On the strategy, you're wrong. The opposition stands for zero when it comes to offshore.
Prime Minister.
Then the opposition turned its attack to other matters.
I refer the Prime Minister to recent comments by Cathy Jackson, National Secretary of the Health Services Union.
And too much talk of border protection was not enough.
And I thank the Deputy Leader of the Opposition for her question, confirming as it does that the Opposition could not sustain its argument for its refugee and asylum seeker policy for half of question time. And of course they can't sustain it because it is founded on hypocrisy about the Refugee Convention and founded on hypocrisy about assurances. So that has fallen away.